Well, just as was predicted, the state house passed a budget in the wee morning hours Saturday morning, and that budget does a variety of things. There's some things that were left on the cutting room floor, but top line, it's more than $50 billion. It pays for undocumented migrant health care. It does not extend the Invest in Kids pilot program that gives private tax dollars to a fund for scholarships so families can have school choice across the states. It also increases legislator pay to close to $90,000. So this was a process that unfolded over several weeks. If you recall, they were supposed to adjourn on May 19th. They came to May 19th and said it's a mechanical impossibility to pass a budget in time before they adjourned that Friday. They were going to come back on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and pass the budget. Well, they came back and they didn't have the right vehicle or I guess a deal in place to pass it by Wednesday night to allow the House to get it for 3 readings and then pass it by Friday. So ultimately, they were able to pass it in the Senate, but not without it being clear that it was indeed a partisan budget. And that was made clear not just by the votes, but also by the debate that happened. And if you look at the Senate President, Don Harmon, he laid this out on Thursday night, saying that, hey, he wishes that it was indeed a more bipartisan effort, but that was not the case. He laid out saying that, yes, we had some big spending items for health care and a whole host of other things, but it's a priority budget for the Democrats. Just did not have any Republican votes whatsoever. So here's Senate President Don Harmon with, his concerns as to not having a bipartisan budget.
This is a good process, and I'm proud of what we've done so far. I am disappointed we have not yet reached a bipartisan budget, but I renew my commitment to work with you next year, and we'll try again.
So
please vote yes.
That didn't get a bipartisan budget. He says that they're going to work together to try again next year. That's next year, not on, now when all these tax dollars are going to be ultimately appropriated one way or the other and little Republican input provided. But one thing that I think is getting under people's skin a lot, and we'll hear more about this, but it's the budget that gives taxpayer funds to increase the pay for state legislators. State legislators are queued up to get about $90,000 a year as their base, which is actually, if they're on certain committees, that's going to be more. If they have, the various leadership positions, they're going to get even more. So obviously, some people hear that legislators are going to get a pay raise, and that rubs them the wrong way, especially House Minority Leader Tony McCombie, who early Saturday morning laid out her concerns as to what's going on with this budget and why it's giving pay raises to legislators. So here is Tony McCombie late in Friday or early Saturday morning saying that she has concerns that this is possibly not going to be constitutional when it comes out in the wash eventually.
The salary set in this budget is $89,675, and it should be $89,250. You've provided for a raise in this budget, which is not allowed under the Illinois Constitution. Under the Illinois Constitution, in Article 4, Section 11, a member shall receive a salary and allowances provided by law, but changes in the salary of a member shall not take effect during the term for which he has been elected. This raise is in direct violation of the Illinois Constitution. A raise can only take effect the next General Assembly. You have created a constitutional problem with this budget. Vote no.
So, Leader McCombie for the Republicans saying that this is a constitutional question of the pay raises that's spelled out in the budget and how it goes beyond what is in the COLA. So, we'll see if that gets challenged at all. Is this something that Republicans are going to bring a lawsuit about? We'll hear more about that. But back to the House floor where debates early Saturday morning, right before they passed a budget, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning or something. And while all you guys were asleep and getting ready for the holiday weekend, you have House Speaker Chris Welch responding to Republicans saying that they weren't part of this process. And he laid out a pretty impassioned appeal for them to actually put some votes on the board to support the Democrats' budget.
Every single time the leader asked to meet, I met with her. But I'll tell you, one of the last times I met with her, I asked, will Republicans put votes on the board? I'm still waiting for that answer. Well, I actually found out an hour or so ago. Never got back to me. I asked, will Republicans, will at least you put the leaders on a budget? Isn't that a fair question to ask? That's a fair question to ask. Work with us and put some votes on the board. Put it on the board. Put it on the board. Don't just talk, walk with us. Walk with us. I'm proud of the process that we put in place, and we're going to continue to make better. You've never had a budget this far in advance to go through and to wrap in a bow and to bring it out here as a prop. You've never had that much time. Rather than using it as a prop, read it. That's why we gave you the time to read it, not to wrap it up like a present and bring it to the floor as a prop.
But Republicans, and I would imagine a lot of you taxpayers out there don't see a 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning vote as being fully transparent and allowing for a complete review of a 3,000-page budget. But that's what happened. The speaker saying he's proud of the process, but stepping back, a lot of taxpayers were sleeping whenever they actually got to the substantive debate on this budget. I highly doubt that there was a lot of constituent response back and forth with lawmakers before they actually approved this budget. But they did it. They approved the budget at about 2 or 3 in the morning Saturday morning. We'll talk a little bit more about what's in it, what's not in it, some of the concerns from Republicans, so stay tuned. Coming up here with Springfield's Morning News. I also want to hear from you at 217-629-7970. Your thoughts on all.
Don Howard, our top story. 3 people were taken to the hospital following a stabbing in Springfield Sunday morning.
Talking about Illinois having a budget plan that can be queued up for the governor now after the Illinois House passed the $50 billion+ budget bill in the early morning hours Saturday. That was after the Senate finally got the plan together in the late hours on Thursday. So that meant late Thursday, the House got it for the first reading. They had to read it on Friday. Then they carried over into Saturday morning for a third reading and then passed the budget at 2 or 3 in the morning Saturday morning. But flashing back to this whole conversation about are Republicans taking part in these conversations, House Republicans say that they had 0 parts in the conversations crafting this new spending plan. They say that they wanted some spending cuts. They wanted to shore up a variety of other debts. They wanted to try to find some tax reductions and a variety of other things. But Republicans weren't really heard at the budgeting process. And if you recall, late last week on Thursday, when the Senate late Thursday passed the bill, here's State Senator L.G. Sims critical of Republicans who he says don't want to vote for anything.
Let's talk facts. An additional $500 million in new spending, which you talk about, this is the largest budget ever. Those dollars don't just go into Republican districts. They don't go into the Democratic districts. They go into all districts. That additional $350 million is going to go into Cairo. It's going, just like it's going to go into Des Plaines. It's going to go into Mount Vernon, just like it goes into Chicago. Or we can talk about product. We are at the table. We sat at the table in good faith, but now we are hearing about non-budget issues after all of the discussions that we had. After all of the conversations that we had, and all of the things we focused on to get a good, balanced budget, now we're talking about, now we can't vote for the budget because we didn't pass BIPA. I looked in Senate Bill 250. I didn't see a BIPA appropriation anywhere. We're talking about the Invest in Kids program. I looked in Senate Bill 250. I didn't see an appropriation for Invest in Kids anywhere. If you don't like the budget here, you don't like the budget there, you don't like the budget near, you don't like the budget far. You won't vote today, you won't vote tomorrow, you're not going to vote anyway. So let's be clear. This budget does reflect our priorities. It reflects our shared priorities to move our state forward.
So again, that's State Senator L.G. Sims late Thursday when they passed the budget. Critical of Republicans that don't want to vote for a budget here, don't want to vote for a budget far, so on. But I've seen some comments say it's the Democrats that don't want to budge. It's the Democrats that aren't wanting to even look at spending reductions. It's the Democrats that don't want to look at how to lower the overall tax burden to grow business in the state. It's the Democrats who have refused to have those conversations. So listen, I mean, it cuts both ways, right? Depending on who you ask, the Democrats are going to say the Republicans aren't willing to take part in these conversations. Well, Republicans say it's the Democrats that aren't willing to hear the Republicans point out the need for tax reductions. But you heard Sims there talk about how there's nothing in there about the Invest in Kids program. That's the private scholarship program that allows for private tax dollars or private dollars to go into a fund to get a tax credit. So they're private dollars. It's not taxpayer money. It's private money going into a fund where they get a tax credit so that those funds can be used to offer school choice to kids across the country, across the state, rather. Because, Illinois, we don't have a robust school choice program as other states across the country do. In Illinois, we only have this small Invest in Kids scholarship program, but it's set to expire at the end of this year in the middle of the next school year, unless lawmakers lift that sunset. They did not lift that sunset before they left for the summer. So could they come back in the fall and deal with that? Maybe, but if that's not until after the school year starts, then a lot of parents are going to be questioning whether or not they can actually make something happen with the Invest in Kids scholarship program. But some other things the budget does include. It does include pay raises and a lot of criticism for the pay raises for state legislators. But it also keeps certain tax increases in place. So starting July 1st, you're going to get another tax increase for your gasoline. Starting July 1st, the 1% tax on groceries is going to be restored. And there's a variety of other things that are going to be lifted. State Representative Dan Calkins reacting to this last week before they went and actually started voting on the budget. Here is Calkins talking about how, taxpayers, they're not going to be paying less in taxes. They're going to be paying more in taxes.
Well, all of the gimmicks have run out. I mean, the grocery tax, we'll get another gas tax increase July 1st. There'll be the second one this year, January 1st, and now another one in July 1st. So the people of Illinois are going to pay more in taxes. That's a given. What we're waiting for I think the other shoe to drop, because there's no way that our state income is going to be able to sustain this budget or this increase, with the trajectory that we're on. What was it, $36 million when we first started? Now it's $50 million, $38 million to 50?
Billion with a B.
Billion, I'm sorry, billion. People can't put their arms around a billion, let alone 38 million. But yeah, it was $38 billion and now it's $51 billion in 5 years, 5 budgets. This is a trajectory that we cannot support.
So again, State Representative Dan Calkins talking about the tax increases. State Representative Marty McLaughlin joining alongside Calkins, also talking about those tax increases that taxpayers are going to be hit with July 1st.
We've got about 16% to 20% inflation rate. And Milton Friedman always said it best. Inflation is caused by one thing: government overspending more than they take in. And the federal government takes in more. They create money out of thin air. They send it to Illinois, and we spent it, as Representative Calkins said. So it's not just the fact they're going to pay more. They're going to be able to buy a lot less because the value of the dollar is going down. So it's going to be a double whammy, and it's going to be incredibly painful for consumers in the state. And I think we're right. A year and a half from now, we're going to have to go back to spending levels when I got here at $39 billion 2 years ago. And if we can't figure out as a group working together that that's where we're going to need to go, we're going to go right back to the taxpayers with all kinds of gimmicks, progressive taxes, financial taxes in Chicago that the new mayor's talking about. Guys, we're taxed out in this state, so we better start figuring it a different way, and that actually requires spending restrictions.
But I also asked McLaughlin about the pay raises that legislators are getting in this budget and what he hears from constituents that see this type of thing advancing at the Illinois State House.
So
Well, we're going to all vote against him. I mean, this is ridiculous. These are part-time jobs. You know, if you're going to make these jobs permanent, I mean, Iowa, I think, is $27,000 for the same job. Wisconsin, $51,000. Indiana, $26,000. This is ridiculous. I was a mayor for a volunteer for 8 years. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I think everybody here agrees.
What do you think?
I mean, I want to apologize to the taxpayer. I've actually gone out last year and I thanked and apologized them, and I asked, were you aware we passed a pay raise last year at 11 o'clock at night on a Thursday? They were shocked, and I don't mean to point the finger at the media, but up in my area in Chicago, they didn't mention it to anybody. It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to me as a public servant because, like my friends here, we all have other jobs and other businesses, and we're trying to keep this state solvent. So it is actually an embarrassment to have this done again. It'll be done, what, at 1 or 2 in the morning tonight? Let's do it at 4 o'clock right before your news cycle. You know, that would be refreshing for me.
So Martin McLaughlin sounding off on the legislator pay raises that were included in this budget, and we'll hear more about the concerns Republicans have, especially after a recent audit of a Pritzker-operated grant program for businesses. Does that spell out good things moving forward for other programs the governors have the control over, including the health care subsidies for undocumented migrants in Illinois that's already expected to cost more than $1 billion? So we'll hear a little bit about that here next on WMAY. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop. You can always follow along anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air, and we can connect. So legislators going to give themselves yet another raise. If you recall, at the beginning of the year, before the flip over from the 102nd General Assembly to the 103rd General Assembly, they gave themselves a pay raise for the start of the 103rd General Assembly. But it looks like they're getting ready to give themselves another pay raise, upwards to $90,000, close to it. But then when you stack on top all the committee assignments and leadership assignments, that increases how much taxpayers are going to be paying for state legislators. But there's also part of the budget that passed in the early morning hours Saturday morning by the House after the Senate passed it last week. You have the issue of the taxpayer subsidies for undocumented migrant health care in the state of Illinois. And the governor is going to be given a substantial amount of authority to manage that program. And we heard a little bit about this last week. Go check out previous videos. But he might be able to implement, say, some cost control measures like having co-pays that the undocumented migrants have to pay. But with the governor being the one that's going to have the discretion to do this, he's going to have to craft administrative rules in all of this. Previous programs the governor created, the business interruption grants, there was an audit last week that showed there were very poor oversight and lack of controls on how that money was spent. Almost more than $500 million spent in that COVID-19 tax relief money going to businesses in Illinois. So I asked State Representative Mike Marin, that audit shows a lack of controls in this Pritzker-operated program. How does that fare for what's going to happen with the migrant health care costs? Here's what Mike Marin had to say.
I have a hard time entrusting the governor with much power to manage anything at this point, because I think the other really important part of our jobs is back in the district when we manage things like constituent issues. And ever since I've been in office, we deal with mismanagement through government agencies on a routine basis, like the mess at IDES. One of the big things that we're dealing with right now is that the State Board of Education overestimated federal funds to local after-school programs to the tune of $27 million in the next 2 fiscal years. And so that means locally in Vermilion County that our after-school programs that our disadvantaged children are counting on is going to be cut by, those programs are going to be cut by about $800,000 in the next fiscal year. 3 districts are going to have to close their programs. It's going to amount to about 50 layoffs. And so that's the kind of mismanagement that we see out of this administration on a regular basis. So when we're talking about giving him more authority to manage health care for undocumented workers, I have a lot of heartburn because he does not have a very good track record.
It is Springfield's Morning News on WMAY 92.7 WMAY FM, Springfield's News and Talk.
Avoid a government default. ABC's Elizabeth